Hey, good afternoon, everybody. And after the marking of National Holocaust Memorial Day yesterday, can I absolutely welcome the announcement today by Robert Jenrick around a Holocaust Memorial and Learning Centre to open by 2024, and the fact that it is intended that entry will be free into perpetuity. I think it's absolutely essential that current and future generations have the opportunity to understand and to learn from this tragic and appalling period in our history of the world. We have had detailed discussions today in the Executive on a range of matters, including the timing of a return to classroom learning and the further rollout of our vaccination programme. Before I talk about these in further detail, I want to set out the current COVID-19 context, which is informing all of our decision making. I'm glad to say that our collective efforts to drive infection rates down across our community are continuing to work. The R rate for new cases is now well below 1. In fact, it is sitting between 0.65 and 0.8, and case positivity has fallen to 12% from 17% last week, that emphasising the reduction in community transmission. So I want to say thank you again to all of those who are making daily, albeit difficult, decisions to do the right thing, to protect themselves, to protect their loved ones, and to protect all of our key workers. Every day our medical teams, our healthcare staff, workers in essential retail, postal and delivery staff and teachers supporting vulnerable children leave their homes to go to work in the service of others, and of course we know they are acting selflessly. And so are all of the tens of thousands of people across Northern Ireland who make the job of our key workers safe by staying at home. Our hospitals are continuing to face incredible pressures as they deal with the current high levels of inpatients, and of real concern to us are the number of patients currently needing specialist intensive care support. The number of COVID-19 patients in ICU has doubled over this last month, reaching its highest ever level this week. So, as I've indicated before, there is a lag of a number of weeks between a drop of infection rates and a reduction in the numbers of patients who are severely ill. So we must continue to push down on the curve of infection. So today the Executive has decided that schools will not be able to fully open again before the 5th of March. This will apply to all educational settings, including preschools, nurseries, primaries and post-primaries. Special schools will remain open and mainstream schools will continue to provide supervised learning for vulnerable children and the children of key workers. Childcare settings and childminders will also remain open. We have tried to keep you fully informed on the course of the pandemic, so I know it's unlikely to come as a significant surprise today that we are keeping to remote learning, and it's also in line with decisions elsewhere. But I also understand for so many it will still be felt as a disappointment that we cannot yet press the restart button on this and indeed many other aspects of daily life. As a working mother with children still in full-time education, I have a sense how difficult homeschooling can be practically, educationally and emotionally. The kitchen table is no substitute for the school desk, and as my children would no doubt agree, parents are no substitute for trained teachers or lecturers. I am resolved, as is this Executive, to get our young people back into the classroom as soon as possible, because that's the best place for them to learn and to achieve their full potential and to have the best life chances. And today I want to send a message to all young people to say that we understand how difficult this is for you. You're coping with much change and much uncertainty, and we recognise the new challenges which you are experiencing, and we're determined to do all we can to support you as well. We know you haven't had the benefit of in-class teaching for the equivalent of half of a school year since the start of COVID-19. And for those who are at exam transition points, this has been a particularly difficult time. Today, the Executive also supported a further rollout of the Engage programme, which is aimed at enabling student catch-up, and that will be sourced from COVID funding. The Education Minister is going to bring another paper to the Executive in coming weeks on the details of that. So you can have confidence that things will get better, and we will get there more quickly by pulling together, because our vaccination programme is an important part of our pathway out of this pandemic, and we very much remain on target to meet our targets. Michelle.
Thanks, Arlene, and good afternoon to everyone. And as always, I want to start by sending our sympathy to the 13 families that have lost a loved one overnight. The Executive, as Arlene has said, has had a very detailed discussion today across a whole range of issues surrounding the public health situation, and indeed in terms of our own ongoing response. We have seen a further decrease in the number of positive cases again over this week, which is very encouraging. And again, I want to thank everyone for your work to try and stop the virus from spreading. To all those of you who have stayed at home, worked from home, planned your essential trips, you're not out more than you really need to be, you've made a real significant difference, and we thank you for that. The R rate for new cases has remained below 1 and is now estimated to be between 0.65 and 0.8. And as always, our objective has been to keep it below 1. And if we can do that for as long as possible, then the epidemic will continue to decrease. This will be a continuous challenge, and it will take all of us working together to keep things moving in the right direction. It's a finely balanced situation, and there's no room for complacency. Our hospitals and our healthcare workers remain under very serious pressure, and we really do owe them a huge debt of gratitude. While COVID-19 bed occupancy has reduced very slightly, it does remain very high, with 768 COVID-19 patients being cared for in hospitals and 67 of those in ICU. Hospital occupancy is expected to remain high for many weeks. In addition, recent data suggests that the B117 variant has become more common here. This is very concerning, as we know this strain of the virus is significantly more transmissible. And that reinforces the need for us all to do everything that we can to limit our contacts with other people and to stop the virus from spreading. Given the gravity of the situation we're dealing with, it would not come as a surprise to people that the Executive has taken the difficult but necessary decision that remote learning for all educational settings will be extended until 5th of March at the earliest. This includes preschools, nurseries, primary schools and post-primary schools. Supervised learning provision will continue for vulnerable children and the children of key workers. Special schools will remain open. Childcare settings and childminders will also remain open. We understand how difficult and how worrying this situation is for our young people and for children, for families and for school staff. Young people have had such a tough time over the last year, and we're really trying very hard to improve the situation to allow some normality to return to your lives. And we really hope that that's not too far away. But the situation in the here and now remains very difficult, and we need to keep going for a wee bit longer. The Executive also discussed the issue of travel today. Myself and Arlene, along with the Health Minister, have been involved in discussions both north-south and east-west on this issue. I think there's a desire for everyone to work together and to have a joined-up approach on travel across the two islands. That makes good sense, and we certainly support that approach. But there are obviously some significant details still to be worked through in terms of the detail of those arrangements. But what we can say clearly that no one should be travelling anywhere at the moment, on or off the island, unless it's absolutely necessary. So the message remains to please stay at home. That's the best thing that you can do to protect yourself, your family and others, to keep people safe until we get as many people vaccinated as possible. I too am really encouraged by the positive progress that has been made in the vaccination programme. All care homes have now received their first dose of the vaccine, with 83% having received the second dose. And as of yesterday, 199,000 people have been vaccinated. And last night, the online booking system for the 65 to 69 age group went live, with vaccinations being rolled out through the regional vaccination centres. This will run in parallel with the vaccines being delivered through the GP practices. We encourage everyone who is eligible to receive the vaccine to come forward and to take it up. That's the protection that protection offers you whenever it's offered to you. Vaccines are a very precious resource in the fight back against this pandemic. They are what will get us through this and will allow us to rebuild society and come out the other side. And we're very much looking towards recovery. We're looking towards what recovery looks like and how we can best make it happen, both in terms of health recovery but also in terms of wider economic and social recovery. That work is being taken across departments, and it will be a key focus of the Executive in the time ahead. Finally, just on the issue of finances, the Finance Minister, Conor Murphy, asked ministers last week to bring forward proposals to get funding out as quickly as possible to those who desperately need it. He has advised that he has also undertaken his own contingency planning to ensure that all available resources are spent. The Executive had further discussions on this today, and we are committed to doing all that we can to make allocations to support people, businesses, workers and public services as a matter of urgency. On a separate but hugely important note, I want to finish by marking the significance of this week for the survivors of mother and baby homes and Magdalen laundries. The publication of a research report into the experiences of women and girls who are resident in these institutions and now their adult children is the first step in uncovering the truth and giving them the answers that they have shamefully been denied for far too long. The appalling treatment of survivors is finally being acknowledged, and their voices are being heard loud and clear. Survivors will be at the very centre of the independent investigation ordered by the Executive this week, and we will continue to stand with them every step of the way. Thank you.
Good afternoon. On the issue of schools, you said there that schools will not open before March 5th, so there would clearly be some sort of a suggestion there that they won't open on March 5th. So could you give some sort of indication for parents who are homeschooling, and I declare an interest in this, and who are getting quite desperate? How long could we be talking about before children go back to school?
Well, if I would say firstly, I think I understand your plight. I understand the plight of many parents who find themselves in a very difficult situation. Arlene talked herself about her own experience, and that is very challenging for parents and for, no doubt, for the children as well. Clearly our priority is to keep our schools open where we can, but the current situation dictates that that is not the case, and children can't be in school in the way in which we'd want them to be. We had given an indicative date of mid-February, and obviously that, given the situation with this new variant that's spreading more rapidly, then I think we're left with no choice other than to extend the date. We wish we could be even more certain that that is the definitive date. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We can't be at this stage. But we will keep this under review constantly, as we've always said. Our next review point is in around the 18th of February, and we'll keep this under constant review and try to give parents and the teaching staff as much notice as possible. But our intention will be to try to get children into school as quickly as we possibly can. But unfortunately, because of the new variant, because of the fact that it would spread more rapidly, then it's not wise for that to happen right now.
Look, I think it's very clear that parents are no substitute for teachers or lecturers, and when you have young people at home and they're trying to get online, and we understand the digital divide across Northern Ireland as well, and all of the challenges that that brings. And if you have a couple of children, some at primary school, some at secondary school, they're all trying to get online, they all need devices. We very much understand the pressure that families are under at this point in time, and like you, I do declare an interest in all of that. So we will certainly want to see children back at school as quickly as we possibly can, and I know that that is the very clear view, not just of the Education Minister but of the entire Executive, Tracy. So it's important that we work towards that. It is also important, though, that we give people a clear view as to what's happening, because there has been criticism in the past that we haven't given people enough notice of what is happening in relation to schools. So we felt it was important to indicate today that we would not be back before the 5th of March in schools. Remote learning will continue. Obviously, for vulnerable children and for special schools, they still remain open. So we will work through this, and we will try very hard to get children back to school as quickly as we can, but in a way that provides safety and security for them and indeed for the staff as well.
And on the issue of the money, 300 million, we understand, on the COVID money has to be spent by the end of the financial year. Can you say now that no money will be sent back to the Treasury come April? Will the Executive be able to spend this money?
Yes, and we're working our way through that right now. We've had a good discussion on it today. There's a number of very good ideas that have come forward from ministers. The Finance Minister has asked for all ministers to bid for the money to come forward with ideas, and certainly there's some things already on the table, but we're going to come back to this again next week. But the Finance Minister was very sure in giving an assurance today to the Executive that he has contingency plans in place, that the money will be spent to the best effect, of course. We want to make sure that we spend the money and target it towards those who need it most, and we're working our way through that as we speak.
And just two things to follow up on there. First of all, we should remember that this is money for the purposes of COVID and to ease all of that, and it cannot be used for other issues. And secondly, we are engaging through the Finance Minister to try and get some flexibility in relation to rolling some of that money over. And I know Conor was telling us today that he's working with the Welsh Finance Minister and the Scottish Finance Minister on that issue. So clearly there's probably an issue there as well in relation to spending this COVID money. And we know that COVID is going to go beyond the end of the financial year, so we would make the argument that we certainly would need financial support to be able to help people as well.
Afternoon. This COVID money, 300 million, first of all, can it be used to pay the £500 to all health staff? And secondly, I understand Peter Weir in his one paper today suggested that the vaccine priority be given to special needs teachers. Now, he was told to take that away, tighten up the proposal, and the likelihood is it'll be signed off by yourselves tonight or early tomorrow. Is that the case?
Just in terms of the health payment, so we very much welcome the fact that the £500 payment in recognition of the work of the healthcare staff throughout the pandemic has been announced, and that is being paid from the Health Minister's own budget. He didn't need to bid for that because you'll know that he handed some monies back in terms of the monitoring round. So the £500 is part of the Health Minister's budget as it currently stands. And on the issue of special schools, there is a piece of work ongoing between health and education, and we expect to get a report back on that later on.
So, okay, second question. The funeral this week, can't leave it without mentioning that, especially because, Arlene, your party put a statement out just before this press conference saying that you and a number of other party members had met the Chief Constable. What did you say to the Chief Constable? What do you want the Chief Constable to do? How difficult has this been? Clearly not quite as difficult as the Bobby Storey funeral, or you probably wouldn't be standing here. And Michelle, I know Sinn Féin held their own event, but nevertheless, 2 or 3 councillors were told were standing along the road, maybe not part of the cortege. Do you wish that funeral hadn't happened the way it did, in an apparent breach again of the health regulations, when other people have to stick to 25 people only at a funeral? It would appear there's a different rule for some Republican funerals.
So let me say, yes, I did have a meeting this morning with the Chief Constable along with my policing board colleagues, because we wanted to raise various issues. We've raised around 10 breaches now through the policing board in terms of COVID and Republican either funerals or shows of strength, and we haven't really had much back from either the Chief Constable or the policing board. So we're looking for clarity in relation to that, because this goes to the very heart of credibility. You cannot have a select group of people who are above the law or not being treated the same as everybody else. And I want to see everybody treated the same in terms of COVID restrictions, and I think it's not helpful at all in terms of messaging. If you have some people who appear to be able to have these funerals without fear or favour, and then others, and I've made the point often, I have missed a large number of funerals which I should have been at, which I couldn't go to because of the restrictions, the last one being on Sunday past. So I think it is important to say, Gareth, that the law should apply equally to everyone. That's the point I was making today to the Chief Constable, and that he has to work hard to gain credibility back in relation to that, because there is anger in the unionist community at the moment, and I think it's only fair that we talk to him about that anger and then ask him what he's going to do about all of that.
I think the first thing to say is that when you're speaking about a funeral, you're talking about a family that have lost a loved one, so a family that are grieving, and I think you have to always be mindful of them. In terms of the funeral that you refer to, you know that Sinn Féin were not involved in the organisation of the funeral. In fact, that we had our own online celebration of his life to mark as a mark of respect. So the PSNI have a job to do. Everyone should follow the public health advice and they should get on with doing their job. I think it's important, Gareth, that we let the PSNI do their job.
This twin-track approach to the COVID-19 vaccinations means that a 65-year-old could be vaccinated today, but somebody over the age of 70 could be waiting a number of weeks. Do you think that's a fair approach?
Well, first of all, I think our vaccination programme is probably the envy of everyone across the British Isles because it has been rolled out in such an effective way. And I think it allows us to vaccinate more people quickly. And the way in which we have been able to go into, Michelle referenced the nursing homes and the fact that we have at least one dose to all of our nursing homes now, and 83% have received their second dose, means that we are protecting our most vulnerable in our society, and I think that's very important. But the way in which we're vaccinating has been very clear. It has been set out. We have that twin-track approach. So the Pfizer vaccine goes through the vaccination centres to make sure that we can use it in the appropriate way and in as fast a way as possible, because we all know the challenges around the Pfizer vaccine. And then in the GP centres, and I think it was 321 GP centres, are rolling out the AstraZeneca vaccine to those people who are over 70 and 75. So yes, we think it's working well, and I ask people to be patient and to work with us. I got a text this morning from a good friend telling me that she went online last night and she's now getting her vaccination, and she's around 66, really looking forward to getting that. So we're able to get the widest number of people possible, and I think that that's a really good story.
I think by and large it's been a day of hope, and you saw that yourself, I'm sure. You can see many people commenting on social media that, you know, their parents or their grandparents booked their tests, and about the feeling that that gave them, not just the individual who was getting the vaccination but also the whole family. And I think, you know, that's a positive thing. I think that certainly when we discussed this today at the executive, if you know, there was 5 different categories of people that will receive a vaccine. We're told that by the end of the scheduled second sort of cohort of people that was receive their vaccine, that anomaly will have sorted itself out. So basically all those over 65 will be scheduled or vaccinated as per the schedule that was set out previously. But I do understand that there's a bit of confusion today around that issue, but hopefully we'll be able to explain that to people, and they will all get their vaccine as quickly as possible. But there are 2 different streams, if you like, or 2 different routes in to get the vaccine. If you're clinically vulnerable, you're getting vaccinated through the vaccine centres, and if you're if you're clinically vulnerable, you're being called in by your GP or your consultant if you're being seen in the hospital, and then everybody else through the other stream. So perhaps that's where there's maybe a bit of confusion.
And do you think anybody coming into Northern Ireland from Great Britain should, through the ports and airports, should undergo some sort of mandatory quarantine?
Well, at the moment, anyone that comes into Northern Ireland, this is something that we set, I think, before Christmas, needs to isolate for 10 days, whether they're coming from the Republic of Ireland or from Great Britain. Obviously, there are exemptions to that because there are a lot of people that work cross-border and indeed work in Great Britain and come back into Northern Ireland. The Common Travel Area has served us very well. Throughout all of this. We've been having conversations, as the Deputy First Minister has indicated, around international travel, and particularly from those areas where the new variant seems to be prevalent. And I think it's important that we conclude those conversations as quickly as possible to try and ensure that we cut down the risk of the new variant, or new variants, I should say, coming into Northern Ireland.
So there will be ongoing conversation, and I think that's really important across the 2 islands. And let's, I think, try to align the issue of travel as best as we can, and to try to protect the 2 islands as best we can from these new strains that are obviously coming in from further shores. So I think it's really, really important that we continue this conversation and we finally crack the issue of travel and actually get it right.
Travel, you know, a lot of people will be angry that the new variant is here, and that's the reason that schools have remained closed now until at least the 5th of March. Do you think we should have closed the borders sooner and got this issue under control a lot sooner? A lot of people will be saying maybe these talks are somewhat maybe too little too late, and the variants, as you say, are already here.
Well, I don't think there's any evidence of the South African or South American variant being here in any great numbers, and those are the ones that we are concerned about, because whilst the Kent variant is here, it is you can use the vaccine that we currently have. Both vaccines will be able to deal with that issue. I think the concern about the other two variants is that we don't know as yet whether the vaccine does work against those two variants in an effective way. So that's why I think we need to deal with this international travel issue as soon as possible. And of course, the Kent variant was here, I think, before Christmas, and was most prevalent, as you know, in the Republic of Ireland, first of all, but is now, I think, we were told earlier this week, we think about 40 to 50% of the cases now here in Northern Ireland.
Just to add, I mean, as far back as last summer, we were calling for a British-Irish Council meeting because we believed that there was a political solution to be found in terms of the issue of travel. I think I welcome the fact that at least we, even though it wasn't done at that time, that there's more conversation now happening, and I hope that there is a resolution that actually now deals with the issue of travel, because I think when we get into the space where we get this virus suppressed and we keep it suppressed for a period of time, we need to make sure that stays the case and we don't have a resurgence and we don't leave our flank open in any way. So I think this is the time to really drive home this conversation and actually get a resolution.
And in terms as well of the vaccination programme, there are some worries and fears that there isn't enough supply to keep up with the demand that we have here. Is that a great concern to the Executive? Have you spoke about the supply of the vaccination? And if so, if that fear, I suppose, becomes a reality, is that going to push back the mass vaccination by summer?
Well, the Health Minister was able to report to us today that he has supply, I think he said a month hence. He has a clear view of supply a month forward, so he doesn't have any concerns around the supply of the vaccine at the moment. We very much hope that that continues to be the case. Of course, we're watching very carefully the off-stage noises between Brussels and London in relation to the vaccine issue, and it's important that we continue to have the supply here in Northern Ireland to continue with the very good work led by Patricia Donnelly on our vaccination programme.
Thank you.
Thank you.